Hi, I'm Arlene Page, and I'd like to tell you about my favorite saint. And actually, it was my mother's favorite saint also. We prayed to him a lot, and that was St. Francis of Assisi. And I didn't know all the details that I know now, but I'm glad that the pastor chose me to put this uh, together, and I hope you all learned something also. I have pictures at the end, so just because I'm ending, don't turn off the TV, because I have some beautiful pictures that we took while we were there. After watching the movie Under the Tuscan Sun, the village where it was filmed looked so interesting that Ted and I talked about finding the village and spending some time there. The movie was filmed in Cortona, a small village perched on a hill in Tuscany, several hours north of Rome. We found a lady that had an apartment in the center of Cortona and rented it for several weeks. After getting settled in, we saw on a map that Assisi was only about an hour away. So one day we drove over to see the Basilica of St. Francis. I've heard so much about that in my lifetime. The basilica itself is huge, consisting of indoor and outdoor gardens, chapels, and a museum, and of course, the tomb of St. Francis. When I show you the picture, I'll show you exactly where he's buried. There is an upper and lower basilica. The tomb is in the lower basilica, which consists of the tomb and a small chapel. Francis was born in 1181 and grew up in a wealthy family. In his early days, Francis lived a fast life with his friends and dreamed about someday becoming a knight. When Francis was about 20, war broke out between Assisi and another area nearby. Francis eagerly joined the cavalry and went to war, but his army was badly beaten and many of his fellow soldiers slaughtered. Seeing Francis dressed as an aristocrat with fine armor, his captors decided to hold Francis for ransom. He was thrown into prison where he had spent a year before his father finally paid the ransom. During the time in prison, this is the important part, Francis began talking to God, and this was the beginning of his devotion as a follower of Jesus. After he was released from prison, Francis was an entirely different man, and not wanting to return to the life he had known before and go into war. One day, while riding his horse in the countryside, Francis came upon a leper. Perhaps seeing the leper as Jesus in disguise, Francis jumped off his horse and hugged and kissed the leper. He reportedly told others that after kissing the leper, he had the most sweet taste in his mouth and the feeling of freedom so strong so he could hardly describe it. Francis now is in his 20s, stopped working and started spending time in and around Assisi praying in churches. One day while praying, Francis had a vision of Christ where he was told, and I quote, to rebuild the Christian church and to live life of extreme poverty, end quote. Francis obeyed and devoted his life to Christ. Shortly after this vision of Christ, Francis sold a bolt of cloth from his father's textile mill with his horse along with his horse to raise money to build a church. When his father found out, He was furious, and he demanded Francis give the money back. Francis got the money back, tore off his clothes, and told his father that his only father was his heavenly Father. This was believed to be the final turning point when Francis completed his full conversion to Christ. After tearing off his clothes, a priest standing nearby gave Francis some rough clothes to wear, and Francis began his journey living off the land around Assisi, building small churches with stones people would give him, and preaching in the area. In 1224, Francis received a vision of Christ where he was left with the marks of the stigmata caused by the crucifixion of Jesus. Francis was the first person to receive the stigmata, and the wounds stayed with him the rest of his life. The stigmata was central in Francis being canonized a saint. Francis had incredible charisma and had thousands of followers during his lifetime. They listened to his sermons and joined in his lifestyle also. Many of the followers were later known as Franciscan friars. Francis died in 1226 at the age of 44 in Assisi and was canonized a saint 2 years later. The last half of Francis's life was a life of complete love of others. He gave everything he had to others. In chapter 4, in John, verse 12, if we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. This was especially true in the later years of St. Francis. Some time ago, I was executive director of Habitat for Humanity, and after finishing a house, we would have a dedication where volunteers were recognized for their work, and keys to the house and a Bible were presented to the new owners. During one particular dedication, there was an older gentleman sitting on the porch steps where we were making the presentations. This old gentleman had asked if he could pick up the odd pieces of lumber around the house while it was being built. At the presentation, one of the certificates of appreciation was made out to him for helping keep the place tidy. Later, I noticed the same man crying after the ceremony was over. I went over to him and asked what was wrong, and I was sorry if I had offended him in any way, because I apologized, but I didn't realize if I had done anything to him. He said, No. I had to quit school when I was young to work for the family to survive. This was the first certificate he had ever received in his life. So I cried too. That simple act of love and kindness meant so much to that Habitat gentleman. Just as a simple act of kindness like calling a family member or friend, especially during this pandemic, time can make more of a difference in someone's life than you might ever know. Now I would like to show you some of these pictures and I'll tell you which one's the upper or lower basilica. One is the upper, one's the lower, and where St. Francis is buried. I'll try to point that out. And the other picture is of Assisi. So when you go there, you'll know exactly what it looks like. I would like to thank Pastor Dale for giving me an opportunity to present this devotional. This is Assisi. This is the lower basilica, which contains St. Francis' body, and I'll show you. You probably can't see as well, but there's a little spot right here that goes along with this darker color, and all the candles were lit around it, and that's supposed to be where the body is. So I'll let you see that for a minute. Maybe you can pick it out. We were so lucky to have these pictures that Ted could print out for you. And this is the upper part of the church where you can go in there, but you can't just walk everywhere. They do have restrictions, but it was just a thrill for us to see St. Francis's casket. Thank you very, very much.